Okay, so in a somewhat underwhelming co-main event, we have Paddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon. So Paddy Pimblett, 19-3, fighting out of the UK, standing 5'10", with a reach of 73. Then on the other side, we get Jared Gordon, 19-5, fighting out of the United States, 5'9", so Paddy will have 1 inch height advantage. And then Jared Gordon's reach is 68. I don't think this would be as underwhelming as it is if Paddy was fighting somebody else. Like, even if he was fighting Terrence McKinney, I think it would have been better. But we get Jared Gordon, and we're going to take a look at the records. Paddy Pimblett is 19-3. Currently, I think he's won 3 fights in a row. He won 3 fights in a row in the UFC.
Yeah, he undefeated in the UFC. And performance of the nights and all of them.
In the UFC, 3 wins, and 3 finishes.
It looks like he's improving too, because his first fight in the UFC, he didn't really look too sharp. It's just a weird matchup because Jared Gordon, he's capable of winning this fight, but Jared Gordon, he's well-rounded. He's not particularly great anywhere, but he's good at fighting towards his strength. And the reason why I got to pick against Jared Gordon is because I don't know if it's decision-making or IQ, but it's certain moments in fights where he loses in ways where he shouldn't lose. To say he's well-rounded and say he's real durable. Because even when he got knocked out by Charles Oliveira, man, like at one point, that's when Charles started knocking people out.
That fight lasted 1 minute and 1.5
exactly.
minutes.
And that's when Charles started knocking people out. Where prior to that fight, Charles wasn't really known as a knocker artist, so nobody want to talk about that. But the thing is, Jared, like, he's good. It's almost like he's just missing something, man.
But I gotta say this: you go look at the Grant Dawson fight. It was competitive for a while, and Grant was able to do certain things to pull away, particularly with the grappling. And then towards the end, Grant was able to take his back and then submit him. I gotta say this: Paddy's jiu-jitsu is very underrated, and I think it's way better than what people give him credit for. And when you go back and when you look at Jared fights, a lot of times he's able to do things to fighters who have a certain level of athleticism and strength, because Jared is a strong guy. And if their strength and endurance is not on his level or at a certain level, at some point in the fight, he can take over and he can kind of bully them, because just the pressure that he brings, like, he gonna throw a lot of leg kicks. Striking, he doesn't really throw a jab, but a lot of time he loads up on strikes. Now, if he hits you, it can definitely hurt you, but you can kind of see the punches coming a mile away. It's always a left hook. It's always a right hook. The old Paddy, I think Paddy probably would have got caught with something like that, but you made the point that Paddy has been cleaning up his striking and is looking better and better.
Is it though? Because,
to be fair, the Jordan Levitt fight really don't count, because you don't really have to have striking in order for your striking to look good against him. So,
and then who he fought before Jordan? He fought against
Rodrigo Vargas,
and that fight didn't really count because it ended in the first round and he took his back fast and submitted him.
Yeah.
So, you can't blame Paddy for fighting the way he do, because the point is to get the W. But at the same time, we're not really seeing enough in his striking to see if it's getting better over time.
But I think that his athleticism and what he brings to the table will be too much for Jared at the end. One thing I do think might happen, I can see Jared actually hurting Paddy. I can't see him finishing Paddy. For instance, he was fighting Michelle Quinones and actually hurt Michelle. He went in to finish Michelle. He went in for a takedown. He almost got caught in a little bit of a guillotine, but he was able to work his way out of it. It was no danger. But I just remember thinking, I remember Jordan Levitt dove on a takedown for Paddy, and Paddy almost got him in a guillotine. Remember, Jordan had to twist out of it? And it's just little stuff like that where I could see Paddy just catching Jared. Even Grant Dawson had his back for like half a round in their fight.
The only thing is Michelle, that fight happened in 2017.
I know.
And that's things with Jared is weird because he's actually getting better. And we can't act like Grant Dawson, he fought that fight a certain type of way. But he had to fight this fight boring, man, because on the feet, he wasn't really looking
too hot.
Yeah, man. So, which you can't blame Grant because he's a wrestler. But my other point is Grant is a way better wrestler than Paddy.
But, he might be a better wrestler technically, but when it comes to athleticism and controlling opponents in the cage, I think Paddy can handle him. You also got to think about Grant Dawson actually was controlling Jared for quite a bit on the ground.
Yeah. And
he kept slipping out of so many submissions. Grant finally got a submission in the third round, but he went for 2 or 3 submission attempts on Jared. that Jarrett was able to get out of. I just think that Grant also looked very sloppy in that fight. If I replace Grant with Paddy in some of those positions, I think that fight was over way faster than what it did. And I'm just...
the only thing is, how can Paddy get the fight? Because we know on the ground, he's on a different level than Jared Gordon. The question is, how can he get the fights to the ground? Because we've seen Paddy, I don't know if you remember, but a couple months ago, we was watching some of his prior UFC fights, and he was diving for legs, and he didn't look too good like when he was trying to get the fights to the ground.
Basically, he's strong and he can wrestle, but his injuries are terrible.
Oh, yeah.
He almost got the Ricky Tercios thing going on, where it's like what are you're literally going from your chin up in the air swinging wild until you literally dive on a single leg.
And it's weird because Jarrett's takedown defense is not great, but it's good enough to stop takedowns if people can't set it up, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense.
When it comes to that,
I already know how this fight gonna happen, bro.
Hey, one comparison I have, I don't know if you thought about this or not, but one comparison I have of Paddy to one of Jarrett's former opponents is Joaquim Silva.
Okay.
Because you know the way he's kind of wild, he could be technical, but he's more of a brawler. And that's how kind of Paddy is, the way he throws his pen. He's becoming more technical, but just looking on prior UFC fights, when we actually saw his striking, reminds me of Joaquim Silva. And I don't have to tell you how that fight ended. He was able to go out there and finish Jared Gordon with strikes in the third round.
Well, Joaquim ain't got the best cardio either, do he?
Oh, absolutely.
Is that the same Joaquim you're talking about?
That's the one he does good for a couple rounds and then he's done.
Hey, one thing that's interesting when we look at these statistics is that they both have a similar KO percentage, right? They both have a similar KO percentage. The submissions, you see a stark contrast. Jarrett's last fight that he lost was by a submission, and it took a lot for Grant to get there. I don't want people to look at that submission loss and think, oh, you could just take Jarrett down. No, Jarrett was standing up. Jarrett had good takedown defense. Jarrett was able to stand up and still keep winning the fight.
Let me say
Grant
this.
really lost towards the end of that fight.
And let me say this, and I hate to cut you off, but the reason why this fight really doesn't really age well, or I don't know how to say it, but the reason why you can't really hold the Grant Dawson fight against Jarrett, because what did he do to Mark Madsen?
Yeah.
Grant Dawson. So you guys saying Mark Madsen is an Olympic caliber wrestler.
No, but I'm not holding the Grant loss against him. That's what I'm saying. Because what I'm getting at is that it took a lot for Grant to do that, and Grant was losing a lot of that fight.
Yeah.
And so when I look at the submission percentage, though, if I take some of those positions that Grant had on Jarrett, I know he was able to get out of. It was very impressive that he was able to stay in the fight like that. I just think that Paddy can do it. And what made me really think that is Paddy's last fight against Jordan. Jordan had one way to win. No, Jordan only had one way to make it competitive. And he got dominated there. Paddy really impressed me with that submission. High key, he had Jordan in a few submissions.
Jordan had some moments too, man. Though the first round, he dominated Paddy. Though the first round, he just controlled Paddy against the cage. I mean, Paddy went for the guillotine, though, but he still lost that round, in my opinion.
Yeah, but when you watch Jared Gordon fight, it's very clear why the UFC gave him this fight. On the feet, he loads up on the strikes too much. This little thing where he throw 3 or 4 leg kicks in a row.
I think that's gonna work, man. I think Paddy.
Wait a minute, that might actually do something.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think, in my opinion, I see Paddy winning, but he has to fight one way. Because this is a type of fight where you can't go out there and fight Jarrett's type of fight. You got to fight your type of way, like you did against Jordan.
Hey, but peep this. Look at the decisions. Jarrett knows how to get decisions. Okay,
bro. It depends on how you look at it. You can look at it two ways. You can look at it as Jarrett 56% decisions. You can look at it as if, okay, he know how to get the job done.
Or he's very durable.
He's very durable, but you also can look at it, because that's another reason why I think Paddy gonna win his fight. Only 2% of his, is it 2 or 21? 21% decision.
He win 21% of his fights by decision.
And that's what I was going to say. That's why I would say that the second way you can look at it as if Paddy is going to find a way to get the finish. Because the thing is, I've seen Paddy lose a couple rounds. He come back in the second. It's almost like he gets stronger as the fight goes on. And I can see Jarrett, because he's been finished in third round before. So I can see him winning on the feet and then finding a way to lose.
Look at the average fight time. Look at the knockdown average per 15 minutes. Jarrett has never knocked nobody down in the UFC.
That's why I said, because you said he got power, and I was like, man.
I've seen him hit people hard. He didn't knock them down, but they end up going for takedowns, or they had to make adjustments. Dawson, he had to make a lot of adjustments, man, but Jarrett was getting the better of that stand-up. But look at Paddy. Paddy is averaging almost a knockdown per 15 minutes. And that just lets me know, so they got a similar percentage of knockout wins, right? Paddy has almost one knockdown per 15 minutes, and look at the submissions. This lets me know that more than likely, no matter what happens, Patty's going to probably knock him down at some point and then submit him. That's what I think is going to happen.
Another thing you got to look at is the fact that this is their careers, because I don't think Jared is not. He only knocked out one person in the UFC, and that was Michael, right? Or Michelle.
Yeah.
He only knocked out Michelle, so that's his whole career. So you gotta, when you look at these stats, you gotta look at the UFC stats, because those are the ones that matter. But that's tougher competition.
Yeah.
But another thing I was gonna say about Jared Gordon, sometimes he puts himself in bad positions. You ever notice, like, he might be winning the fight, but then he'll go for a takedown. So he can mix it up, but sometimes it's like, bro, just keep the fight standing up. You ain't gotta shoot, man, every 2 minutes. And I can see him winning on the feet against Patty and shooting for a takedown.
It's funny you say that. Look at the submission average for Patty, 4.69 per 15 minutes. Jared, even if he get a dominant position on the ground, he's not even going for submissions. You don't even have a knockdown. I'm sorry. I got to pick Patty here. And I'm not even the biggest Patty fan like that.
And the last thing I'm going to say is this is a tough one to put money on, if I'm going to just be honest, because I kind of smell the upset. He's durable, man. He's crafty on the ground, even though he has submission losses. But you got to look at who he lost to. He lost to Grant, Charles, Joaquin Silva. You never know which version of him you get, man.
Never know.
Hey, you know, Carlos Diego, at one point, Carlos, people were saying he was going to be in the top 10.
Yeah.
So you can't really look at his losses.
But right now, Patty is, according to the UFC's website, minus 190. And Jared is plus 160. You would think that Patty will be a bigger favorite.
I don't think so. I wouldn't.
With the hype?
It's not.
Because, you know, hype is one thing, but when it comes to people putting their money, it adjusts. Yeah. People get a little bit more logical with it and say, wait a minute, Jared is a lot tougher than we give him credit for. But this is the thing. Jared is not a guy you can just knock out, though. He's not a guy you can just submit. He's not a guy you can just wrestle. When it's all said and done, I don't think that he's somebody you can just go out there and finish just because Patty is a bigger name. Patty has shown that he's obviously growing in the cage. He might turn out to be a really good fighter at the end of the day, like a great fighter. The reality, it comes down to this. Jared is very tough. I can see him surviving some submissions. I can see him getting hurt and surviving low key as far as not getting knocked out. But the difference comes in when we actually look at these percentages of Patty actually is scoring knockdowns. Patty is very aggressive with submissions if he get takedowns.
Don't think it's who he knocked down though. Who he knocked down? He has knocked nobody down on the level of Jared.
But I would say if we look at Jared's losses, he lost to good fighters, arguably great fighters at the time. Two of them at least. One of them has the potential to be great in Grant. But when you look at the wins, he didn't beat anybody of notice up until Leonardo Santos. Let's keep it a buck. Not a single one of these wins amounts to anything. None of them aged well. And I don't think that all these people are on losing streaks or anything. I don't know that. But I know half of them not in the UFC. I know that. I know we've been doing this podcast for 6 months. We only did a prediction for one of these people, Leonardo Santos. So his wins are against people who you're supposed to beat these people.
I'm going to be honest. If Jared Gordon had a little bit higher fight IQ, it's not really a fight IQ, but he has the Cody Durden thing where sometimes he finds ways to lose. And it's not bad. But against somebody like Patty, I think Patty's gonna find a way to win and capitalize on that, on Jared Gordon's mistakes he makes in fights.
Because Patty, it ain't like he indestructible. He ain't invincible.
Yeah.
But one thing is Patty is durable and Patty is opportunistic. That's the thing about him. If you make a mistake, he can definitely capitalize on a knockout. And obviously on the ground, I mean, I've almost wanted to say that Patty has been more of almost of a grappler than a striker in the UFC, low key. When it comes to finishing fights, like
the last 2 fights at least.
Yeah, the last 2 fights.
But he knows he got to get his fights to the ground, though.
And when you look at his record, he's got 9 submissions.
The thing I was gonna say is Jared Gordon. He has 4 knockout losses, but you got to understand a couple of them knockout losses. He really won. Like he was on his feet and they stopped the fight. That's another thing is I can see Patty like finishing them dude and him not giving up or getting knocked out cold with the referee jumping in. See, Patty like 1 or 2 punches away from the referee just coming in.
And Jared is so tough that you're not just necessarily going to knock him out cold.
Yeah.
So I can see him being very durable to the point where you got to stop it. Like, remember Brian Barberena and Robbie Lawler, where the referee just had to say, hey, I got to stop this. But ultimately, Jared is not to be slept on. And like you said, there is the possibility of an upset. I don't want people thinking that Patty just gonna go in there and slaughter him, because Patty got a lot of holes in his games, but they're getting better. I just don't think that Jared is the type of fighter who can exploit that. Not right now. And again, I go back and look at Jared's wins. None of these wins, I mean, you could add them all up into one person, and I don't think you get.
But we could say the same thing about Patty. So ain't no point in really saying that, because other than Jordan Levitt and
Yeah,
Jordan,
but you got to realize Jared been in the UFC since 2017. Patty been in the UFC for what, barely a year.
Yeah, true.
So that's the difference. Is Jared has been around for a while and has not made any dents in the division. Patty been around for 3 fights and is about to
turn to featherweight. Jared fought at featherweight? No, man. You fought at featherweight, bro. And do you know how big Patty is? No, man. But I can see him winning the first 2 rounds, Jared Gordon. But I think he's going, and no disrespect to Jared Gordon, but I think he's going to find a way to lose. And I think Patty's going to find a way to win. I think Patty's going to be getting destroyed, to be honest. I think in the 3rd round, he's going to come back and he's going to get the submission.
What really seals it for me is the fact that Jared there's different levels of power. You got that nuclear power to where if this person needs just even touch you, then you have certain people like Patty has knockout power somewhat at a certain level so far, not necessarily in the UFC. Like he can finish people with strikes, but not necessarily one punch. But then there's a tier where people they hit hard. Who is that one person that hits hard, but he's not a knockout artist, but he loads up on his punches? Rafa Garcia, is that who it is? Stocky guy, and if he hits you, it's like, yeah, but I'm saying, obviously he hits hard compared to the average person, but it don't translate into actual knockouts. Jared has that kind of power, but
you still have to respect him, bro.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like he hasn't really shown it.
Yeah, but it's not fight finishing, fight altering power, and the fact that Jared does not have any knockdowns in all these fights that he's been in the UFC since 2017. You don't have a single knockdown, and Patty in 4 fights is averaging almost 1 knockdown per fight. And we know a lot of those fights, Patty was losing up until he won. I'm sorry, I got to go with Patty here.
Yeah, me too. Patty by 3rd round submission.
Whatever you want.